Well, good morning. Welcome to Thought for the Day. Terry has done one or two what is described as slightly more serious thoughts for the day over last couple of weeks, and I'm afraid today is a slightly more serious one from me. And what I want to say in starting is that what you believe really matters. What you believe really matters. I'm sure you've seen in the news. If you haven't, then you probably ought to be aware that there is a tragedy being played out at the moment. A tragedy being played out across the southern and western parts of the United States, also in many ways in Mexico and Brazil and other parts of America. A tragedy of thousands of people catching coronavirus, 40,000 new people catching coronavirus, tested as having coronavirus every day across the United States, mainly in the south and west. Similar numbers in Brazil and Mexico, probably much higher in reality. The likelihood that in a week or two's time, as those infections start to take their course, that hundreds, possibly even thousands more people will die of this difficult, dangerous disease. And the real tragedy is that what underpins what's happening there is a myth. It's a myth that isn't true. And the myth is that you have to choose between science and God. It comes from two ways, doesn't it? It comes, well, if you really believe in science, you can't believe in God. You have to reject him. You have to ignore everything that we learn about God in the Bible. It comes in books like the God Delusion, Richard Dawkins. It comes in novels like the Da Vinci Code from Dan Brown, as he portrays all the truths the apparent truths of the Bible as myths, when in fact what he's telling us is all made up in fact. But it works the other way, that if as they say, if you really believe in science, you can't believe in God. Then it plays out the other way around. That means that if you really believe in God, you can't really believe in science. And the tragedy that's being played out at the moment is that millions of Americans, and probably thousands, millions of people around the world too, have bought into that myth, that they feel that because science and God are opposed to one another, they are suspicious and they can't trust the science. They can't believe what the facts are telling them. And it's having devastating consequences. And the scientists, many of whom are Christians, who are looking at the evidence, looking at the numbers, looking at how the medicine works, they're tearing their hair out. They're saying there's a reluctance to believe the facts spreading out across the world. And that's why this big picture, this slightly worrying picture, ties back to my own story, where my story is woven into this enormous big picture being played out across the world. Because I come from a scientific background. I was brought up mainly studying science subjects. My father was an engineer, came from a medical family, and I grew up, although I didn't quite put it that way, believing that myth. I believed that we were scientific people. And as I sort of thought about the things of God, I thought, well, really, they're a load of rubbish. That's not for me. I believed the myth that if you really believed in science, you couldn't really believe in God. Until one day I discovered Jesus, or it might be better put to say that Jesus discovered me. And what happened as Jesus discovered me, and as I started to explore more about Jesus, that I've never had to give up any of my commitment to the scientific research truth. You see, as I learn more about the extraordinary nature of the universe, the world we live in, how it came into being, or as best we understand it, and how it all fits together so perfectly, that points to a creator quite as awesome as the one the Bible describes. And it's not just science. I mean, history, serious historical research, archaeology, reading all the original documents about the ancient world. Every one of them confirms the Bible's account of history. You can go to the British Museum and see things they've dug up that exactly confirm things written in the Bible. And it's not just history, it's not just science. Psychology, how the mind works, how our thinking works, what helps us cope with life's crises, what helps us to bounce back from life's crises. They tie in exactly with what Jesus taught. Many of the truths that psychologists are discovering, I could say you could have read it first here in the Bible. And so as I learned about Jesus, and I thought about my scientific background, I realised I don't have to choose. The science and the research and the careful observation tells us how things work. And the Bible tells us why, and puts it into a bigger context. You don't have to choose. You can have both. You can have science. You can have a faith in the God of the Bible. In fact, you can't have one without the other. Far from being opposed to each other, you can't really have one without the other. So why am I telling you this today? Well, that's because as we in this country come to this stage of reopening things, which a lot of it's going to happen starting this Saturday, I'd like you to encourage, particularly if you call yourself a Christian, you say that following God is important, I'd encourage you to take what science is telling us about what's safe, about what's wise, take it really seriously. Take responsibility, act responsibly in the light of what science is telling you. Don't be bound up by fear or worry or myths and so on. Look at what the science is telling us. Let's be wise and sensible and responsible people. But let's do it. And maybe here I'm speaking more to, if there are some of you watching who say your first commitment is to science and the kind of observed truth. Let's act in the light of those truths. But to do it not just to look after number one, to stay safe as the government would put it, but to, as Jesus put it, love your neighbour. To act in the interests of others, to think about those who are particularly vulnerable, who are still in danger of catching the disease, to think about the local businesses who need our custom in order to earn a living, to act in a way that reflects those who have been really caught up and trapped in loneliness, and work out how you can reach out to them. So let's hold on to both. Let's hold on to the truth, the scientific truth. Let's hold on to the whys and wherefores that God reveals to us, so that we don't see another tragedy unfold here as it is across the Atlantic. May God be with you and lead you in his ways today.